Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to talk about some Emperor's Children rumours which have started circulating and coming up to the surface once again. Let's face it, it's been like this for ages. We have periods of nothing, and then suddenly it's Emperor's Children, and to be honest, they are pretty much the same as before. Nothing has really changed. The only thing that's changed is that they seem a bit more likely than they were previously, especially when you look at the release pattern for previous god-specific Legion codexes. So, Death Guard, Thousand Suns. I mean, if you look at what Slaanesh has got recently, things are starting to line up quite nicely with stuff that we've already seen. So we have new Fiends, we've got a new Herald, we've got a new Demon Prince, there's new Keeper of Secrets. This is all stuff that is Age of Sigmar based at the moment, but give it maybe two more things, and you will have a very a roughly equivalent deal to what Nurgle and Tzeentch got before Death Guard and Thousand Suns got their codexes. What we're really missing, I think, at the moment are some mortal followers. And whilst Death Guard didn't exactly get mortal followers, there are kind of rough analogues between what those legions got and what we could see from Emperor's Children. So, I mean, at the moment, the list of stuff for the Emperor's Children is incredibly predictable and not out there at all. So, Noise Marines, of course, they would have to be Noise Marines, it's Emperor's Children, and of course those would fall into the same category as Rubric Marines for Thousand Suns and Plague Marines for Death Guard. New Terminators, which again would follow the pattern of Thousand Suns, got their own Terminators, and Death Guard got two varieties of Terminators. They got the Blight Lord, I think it was, and the Death Shroud. And given that Emperor's Children do have somewhat of a close combat slant, it does make sense that perhaps they would have two varieties of Terminators, similar to the way Death Guard do. One could be more ranged, one could be more focused on close combat, possibly using halberds that the 30k Terminators use. Then there's Fulgrim, which of course would fall in line with Magnus and with Mortarion. There is the idea that we would get some sort of mortal follower, which, to be honest, I'm gonna put like Zangors and Poxwalkers in a similar kind of category for this. I know they're not really the same, but some sort of semi-demon, not quite demon, newer version of demon, or just flat-out plague zombie style infantry. Emperor's Children could do with something to fulfill a similar role, and to be honest, that would again fall in line with roughly what we've seen before. There is things like special characters, so of course Lucius the Eternal getting a new model, that seems pretty reasonable, and of course Fabius Bile, or Fabius Bile if you want to give him his real name. That's the thing that's interesting, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. The only outlandish thing that I've really seen is the idea of Noise Marines on bikes or Seekers, or some sort of mounted Noise Marine situation, which has popped up a couple of times, and I've never really known what to make of it. Sounds interesting if it was executed well, and I would hope that if that was the case, there'd be, again, a bit more of a close combat slant on that, just because that seems like it'd be a bit more Emperor's Children and maybe a bit less silly than Noise Marines with actual noise weapons on mounts. That would feel a bit odd, to be honest, to me. I might be alone in that, but so there's nothing really outlandish, there's nothing completely out there, and it's all stuff that matches things that we've already seen before. I mean, there are rough equivalents to what we saw for Death Guard and for what we saw for Thousand Suns, and again, rough equivalents to what we saw in terms of releases for Tzeentch and Nurgle as a whole with the stuff that we're seeing for Slaanesh at the moment. Slight increase in some of the stuff that Slaanesh has would make it fit the pattern really, really well. And given that so far this seems to be a very chaos-heavy year, I initially would have said, well, I'm sure they'd bring out, refreshers of just standard chaos stuff first, but they already are. They already have. They're doing that right now. They're in the midst of it as we speak. So this could just be a very chaos-heavy year, and we'd see this in maybe 3 or 4 months. To be honest, it's just not that implausible, and it follows what we've seen before. The only outlier, and the only thing that makes this interesting, and anything that is kind of a bit different to think about, is the role that Fabius Bile plays. Because I don't think that is a character that should be locked into Emperor's Children. Fabius Bile is not kind of a standard, not like a standard faction character. He doesn't have a particularly good relationship with the rest of the Legion. He is not particularly interested in what the rest of the Legion are doing. He is very much his own person, and being part of the Emperor's Children Codex would kind of make sense in a way, but to be honest, he needs to be more of a... I would suggest he needs to be more of like a Fallen style character that has allegiances in multiple places, that does things for different people, that is not locked into just one specific legion or faction. That's not where his interests lie. That's not something that he is down to do. And whilst we have had kind of minor reconciliation things going on, we've had like Ahriman and Magnus talking a little bit again, and I mean, Typhus and Mortarion do sort of speak, sort of. They're not really buddy about things, but I mean, Dark Imperium is a great example where it's just like, hey, yeah, we agreed to do this, and Typhus is like, or alternatively, Mortarion, you can go fuck yourself, which is an interesting dynamic. But Typhus is still part of the Death Guard. He still identifies as part of that particular legion. He just doesn't get on with the Primarch of it, which, to be honest, when it comes to chaos, disparate factions within the same faction is absolutely reasonable and happens all the goddamn time. Fabius Bile, though, and the Emperor's Children, I feel like are in a slightly different position than Thousand Sons and Nurgle. And whilst I could see like an overall reconciliation bring the Emperor's Children back together to some degree, I mean, they were shattered pretty hard, I don't think Fabius Bile would be all in on that particular kind of endeavour. I feel like he should still be treated a little bit differently. That's the thing that makes it interesting, because it does make sense to give him a new model, and it would make sense to bring him out with Emperor's Children, but at the same time it wouldn't make sense to just make him only part of that faction and have him suddenly be, a driving force for the Legion. He's never wanted to be a driving force for the Legion. It's made pretty clear that that is not where his interests lie. As for the actual rumours, they all make sense, and they're all reasonable, and they're all sensible, and I could easily see it happening, and it would follow the pattern that, let's face it, we're all pretty sure is going to happen, whereby each god-specific legion gets their own codex, and that's just how things are going to be. We've already got Thousand Sons and Death Guard. It makes no sense for them to not do the other two, and if we're already getting a bunch of Slaanesh stuff at the moment, it would just follow on from that naturally, as it has done the past couple of times. For me, the outlier genuinely is Fabius Bile, because it's a case of how do you handle that character? How do you place him in this codex without making it so that you ignore what has been built up about him over however many books and however much background and lore? It's going to be a tricky one to handle. The rest of it I can see easily, and it's like, okay, fine, go ahead. The bit that interests me is, how are they going to handle Fabius Bile if they do release him alongside this book that he should be part of, but also shouldn't be exclusively part of, and shouldn't have that deeper connection to, because it's not part of who he is. It's an interesting thing to think about. I'd be interested to hear what you think they might do with him. Like, I'm assuming he'd be in the book, but in what capacity? Would it be like a Fallen situation? Would it be that he has his own warband of some kind? He kind of sets himself up within the overall umbrella of the Emperor's Children, but at the same time essentially ignores a lot of them. I'd be interested to know what you think. Let me know what you think about all of this stuff in the comments. The chances of such a codex coming along, which I think are fairly good, and especially how they're going to handle that particular character. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all that shit. Click it if you like, and don't click if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.